We are here with the coolest of cool dudes here from ESPN. Don't mistake his bald head for Matt Hasselback. It is actually Rob Demovsky. Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Joey, Brandon, great to be with you guys. And I don't know if your standard of cool is pretty low. If that's what my kids would not say that I'm anywhere near that. So,
No, I would say you're very cool. You know, I was just having a conversation with my friend Matt Ramage this past week. Like our version of like the guests we aspire to have on, it's like most people, it's players and stuff, but like Wes Hockowitz, Mike Spofford, you're pretty much our Devontae Adams, Jair Alexander guest interviews, you know?
well, I hope then that means Wes is like a long snapper or punter.
Right. Yeah.
I'm kidding, Wes.
Wes is the practice squad kicker, just trying to get his name out there, build the brand.
Hey, you gotta ask next time you have Wes on, ask him how I almost ended his career before it started.
Oh boy.
And it has something to do with him hanging up on Jim Morris Sr.
Oh boy. I'm sure that's a great story. And I'm sure there's two different viewpoints. Before we get into the less important stuff, you said something before we started recording that I think we just have to talk about your love for Dr. Pepper. Now, I'm sure all of our viewers know that me and Big B, we have gone maybe 5-6 episodes in our whole run without a Dr. Pepper by our side. So you drink one every day?
Diet Dr. Pepper, which it looks like, Joey, you have the diet, right? And
right.
Brandon, you've got the full on. Have you guys tried the zero?
I have, yes, yeah.
So and I am also partial to the fountain version of the Diet Dr. Pepper. I just think it's even better. Not that there's anything wrong with the regular Dr. Pepper, but the fountain version just takes it up another level. So I'm all about a stop at Quick Trip for a Big Buddy Diet Dr. Pepper pretty much every day. There was like a year where I tried to kick it. And it just didn't take. And I've been trying to get every once in a while I'll tweet something using the Dr. Pepper Twitter handle, and I've yet to get anything from them. Quick story: about 5 years ago, Wes Wilde and I and Bill Huber tweeted something at Tic Tacs, and the Tic Tac they sent us like cases and cases of Tic Tacs, like flavors I didn't even know existed. We had Tic Tacs, honest to goodness, we had enough Tic Tacs for the four of us to divide up for like a year and a half. So I'm still waiting for Dr. Pepper to get on.
That is so funny that you brought that up, because me and Big B, we've been talking like these past 4 months since we've made Dr. Pepper a part of our brand, we need to get sponsored by Dr. Pepper. Like, we don't even need what you just said or like full on sponsorship where we shout them out every episode. We'll do that for free. But just like send us a shirt or something, give us some recognition, man. Like,
well, keep pushing them on Twitter.
Right. Yeah. We'll eventually get that Dr. Pepper notice. Yes. So let's start off. Me and Big B, we always, when we're talking to people like you, experienced vets in the journalism field, the both of us really want to be somewhere in that field for a career one day. So we like to get kind of realizing the most paths. And like, I just love to look at different reporters' LinkedIn pages to see all of their career paths. So give us, Rob, kind of a walk down of everything you've done in life since you graduated high school, every single thing.
Well, you guys are way, way ahead of me, because when I was your age, first of all, none of this existed. But second of all, I never even thought about trying things. And so I really didn't, I knew I wanted to be a reporter. Okay. And I grew up in Chicago. Don't hold that against me. My dad worked in the city. He was a stockbroker, and he would bring newspapers home every day on the train. We got the suburban newspaper delivered to the house, the Daily Herald, Arlington Heights, little suburban paper. But my dad would bring home the Tribune and the Sun-Times on the train, and I'd read it. I shouldn't say cover to cover, because I'd really skipped the news sections and the finance sections and went right to the sports section. But I guess I didn't realize until I started reading papers just how many different jobs there are. Like, I never realized like they had different people covering baseball, different people covering basketball, whatever the case may be. And I just loved reading like the news and nuggets, like, the big stories, fine. Like the long feature stories, I guess, were fine, game stories. But I always went to they were called notebooks at the time, just basically, blurbs, little blurbs with interesting things. And to me, that was the stuff that I thought, man, that was really, really cool. And I kind of wanted to be somebody where do they find that stuff out? Like,
Yeah.
I wanted to be the guy who found that stuff out. So anyway, went to journalism school, did the whole thing where you go to your high school counselor and they say, what do you want to do? And I say, I think I want to be a sports writer. And they give you a list of, 10 or 20 schools that are good for journalism. And like the first school they gave me on the list was Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. And I really didn't know anything about it, but my dad at the time was working for a company based in Columbus, Ohio. And he had friends that had kids that went there. And so Athens, Ohio is about an hour and a half from Columbus. So I think it was summer before my senior year, or I think, yeah, summer before my senior year of high school, we flew to Columbus, drove down to Athens, visited the campus, thought it was just the coolest campus, a little small town, but it was a cool college town. And said, oh, this seems pretty cool. Later that fall, I went and visited a friend of mine who was a year older than me, was a freshman there when I was a senior. I went and visited him. He was a journalism major. We went to the football game. They were terrible. I think they were winless. Left after halftime when the band played. And that night, snuck me into a couple bars. And I said, well, I'm 17 years old. I'm in a bar in a college town. I'm like, I came home and told my parents this is where I'm going. Anyway, actually went there thinking that I wanted to be in broadcasting. They had, like, if you were in the journalism school, there was broadcast, news writing, advertising, and like public relations. I actually started in broadcast and then realized that because it was such a small town, there really wasn't there weren't a bunch of TV stations where you could get experience. There was one student-run TV station, but quite frankly, it just didn't seem very good. So I think it was my sophomore year, I met some guys that worked at the student newspaper, and it was a 5-day-a-week paper, like put out every day completely by the students. There was the only adult in the place was like the guy who ran the business aspect of it, but it was completely independent. The journalism professors sort of, they not that they had involvement in it, but they were very much in favor of students working there. And I think my first beat was covering the Ohio University volleyball team. I didn't know anything. No, I'm sorry. It was cross country. That was my first beat. They had no cross country meets at home. And I wasn't traveling to the Western Michigan Central. So I wrote stories about something I never, ever saw in person, literally never saw. I'd go to practice, I'd interview the players or the runners, the coach, and I just have to come up with these feature stories. Anyway, progressed to, next year I covered a softball team, next year volleyball, or next semester. Finally, by my senior year, I got to cover the football and basketball teams, and we treated it like it was a real job. I mean, we did travel, we went to all the games. And the professors at that point were like, if you have to miss class because you're going to cover a game, go ahead. That's more, you're getting real experience.
Sure.
It's more important.
So on that newspaper, it was like an actual beat where you would have one team.
Yep. We had, if there were 10, 12 sports or whatever there were at the school, there was a different, writer assigned to each sport.
Okay.
And if your sport was not in the season, then you edited, or you laid out, you did design and copy editing and things like that. So my senior year, I got an internship at the Columbus Dispatch, which was big paper, one of the biggest papers in the state of Ohio. It would be like the Journal Sentinel or whatever, but I was in news. And so I spent if it was like an 8-week internship, I spent a week with the government reporter, a week with the cops reporter, a week with the education reporter. So you kind of get to write stories and see what each one of them did. At the end of that year, they actually offered me a job, but it was as a news reporter. And I ended up applying for, I actually didn't even apply, but the local paper in Athens, Ohio, the real paper, not the student newspaper, had an opening for someone to cover Ohio U football and basketball, which is basically what I'd been doing as a student, but now I'd be doing it for the quote unquote real paper. And the pay for that job was like half of what the job at the Columbus Dispatch would have paid. But I could have made twice the money, but it was going to be in news. And I just said, you know what? I wanted to go in this for journalism, but I really wanted to go in it to be a sports writer. So I took the half-pay job, did it for 2 years, got another job at a really small newspaper in upstate New York, covering basically high school sports for 2 years. So now at this point, I'm 4 years out of college, 25, 26 years old, and I applied for a job at the Green Bay Press-Gazette, covering the Packers and UWGB basketball. And I got the job. And to be honest with you, I thought I'd stay in Green Bay for 2-3 years and, move on, like ultimately was hoping to be at, the Chicago Tribune, paper I grew up reading. Ended up, staying here at the Press-Gazette for 16 years, probably would still be there if ESPN hadn't come along in 2013 and say they wanted to have a reporter designated to cover every team. So I got a call in late 2012, early 2013, saying, "Hey, we want to have a reporter on every team, and we'd like you to be our Packers guy. Are you interested?" And I'm like, "Am I interested? Where do I sign?" Right? I mean, we were the guys in college that we'd watch Sports Center all night. And at that time, you guys probably don't realize it, but at that time, they did one Sports Center at like 11 o'clock, and it just repeated hour after. It was the same show. Like, they didn't tape a new show. There wasn't a new anchor. I mean, it was like the same. And we'd sit up and watch it at 11. We'd watch it at 12. We'd watch it at 1 a.m. Just the same show over and over. So yeah, ESPN, sure. And I guess that's how we got to where I am today.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you applied to the Green Bay Press-Gazette, was that because that was the job open? There's a professional team.
So at the time, believe it or not, there was like a weekly magazine called Editor and Publisher that had classified advertising for newspaper jobs. And literally, you go to the first thing I did wasn't read the articles in it. I went to the back of the thing, looked at what jobs were open. And I never really thought about living in Green Bay or whatever. When I was a kid in Chicago, my neighbors had a summer cottage in Shawano. So I used to come up here and, go to their cottage, and never really thought about living up here. Really never thought, I didn't think anybody actually lived here. I thought it was where everyone from Illinois went for the weekend. But yeah, just applied for it, interviewed. Pete Doherty and Chris Hovel took me out to dinner, and and then I got offered the job and took it. So I started, I believe I started at the Press-Gazette week 5 of the 1997 season.
Whoa.
I think, if I remember right, I'd have to look at the media guide, but I think they played the Lions on the road week 4 of the 97 season. And I started that Monday, the next day. I didn't even have cable hooked up in my apartment. I had to go to a bar and watch the game on TV so that I could, know what the hell happened. I'm sorry, it was week 1, 2, 3. The week 5 game was at Detroit. And I started that Monday after, September 29th, 1997. The first game I covered was a home game against Tampa. And then the next week was a road game at Chicago.
Man, you have a photographic memory. I don't know what the word, but remember your first James.
I'll tell you a quick story about that first road game. And I actually ended up, I think I may have written this at some point, but I didn't realize, and I would have no reason to realize this, but on road games, the Packers front office people and their scouts, they sit in the press box with us. Okay. So I'm at Soldier Field, the reporters are in the front row, and Bob Harlan, Ron Wolf, all the scouts are in the row behind me. I didn't even realize it. So I'm nervous, whatever, never covered a game on the road. I'm sitting there with my notebook and watching the first kickoff, and Pete Doherty's sitting next to me, and somebody on the Packers gets hurt on the kickoff. And the game, they're attending to them. And keep in mind, a press box is quiet. They make this announcement before the game. This is a working environment, no cheering, And all of a sudden, I hear from behind me, and I hope I can say this on your podcast, but I hear this voice behind me go, "Drag his ass off the field and let's play." And I looked at Pete and I was like, "Who the hell is that?" And Pete's like, "That's Ron Wolf." And I go, "Wolf saying that about one of his own players?" And I was just like, well, that was sort of my welcome to the NFL moment. Wow, this really is a business. Just drag this poor injured guy off the field and throw somebody else out there. Saying that about one of his own players.
That is a fantastic story. Big B here now is a varying question. Thanks for that story, that whole story. That was incredible. Big B has a very, very dire question about the Packers beat, one of the Packers beat writers. So let's hear it.
All right. Very, very important. Why is Tom Silverstein's nickname Spoon?
You know what? He's been Spoon ever since I got here. I think, and I don't know this, I just always assumed it was a playoff silver spoon, like silver, like there's you guys probably don't never even heard this expression, but there's a expression that someone was born with a silver spoon in their mouth, means they were born like rich. Not that Spoon is rich at all. He's whatever, but I think it was just Silver Spoon, Silverstein. I think I've never actually asked him. That would be my guess. But yeah, everybody calls him Spoon.
Wow, we'll have to
even
look
LaFleur,
around.
like the other day, LaFleur called him Spoon, and LaFleur's, hasn't been around long enough long to know us or whatever. But he called him Spoon the other day.
We'll have to find out some more about that one.
I thought you were going to ask me something juicy about Wes. Wes and I, like, Wes is one of my best friends or whatever, but we have this, like, on Twitter, like, we make kind of take cracks at each other, and people think that we, like, it's like a real fight, like that we hate each other. So we keep it up just for people who think that it's actually real. But.
I can tell that you guys are joking, but Andy Herman and Peter Bukowski are friends that I can sometimes they get too feisty. I can't tell if they're joking or not.
Yeah, Wes and I are kidding.
Big B's got one more question here, and then we'll move on to a few other topics here.
All right. I feel like I ask everybody this, but what is your favorite Jamal Williams story?
I cannot tell my favorite Jamal Williams story on this. And even if you could go X-rated, I still couldn't tell it. But I will say this. This is the only thing I'll say. Jason Wilde and I were talking to him in the locker room one day, and this is the things that you miss about being in the locker room that we're not there now with the COVID rules. But we were just standing in the corner of the locker room, really not doing anything because we had nobody to talk to. I think it was a Friday. All of our stories for the week were done. And Jamal comes, we were just kind of standing by where the players exit. We're just kind of standing there. And Jamal stops and talks to us. And somehow or another, we got onto the topic of how he ended up at BYU. Okay. BYU is a Mormon school where you can't drink, can't smoke, can't even have Dr. Pepper. Mormons can't even drink caffeine, and certainly no things about engaging with members of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And I cannot say anymore, but he basically said,
"Oh no,
he never followed he goes, I'm not Mormon. I didn't have to follow those rules, so I was doing this and this. I can't not use words. Get Wilde on, maybe he'll tell you the story, but I can't say it."
I think we can fill in the blanks there, knowing what I'm pretty sure Jamal faced some suspensions for something. Wow, that was not what I expected.
He is a serious character. I think it was Jamal Williams. One time we were standing around with about 6 or 8 reporters, a couple camera people, and he had gum in his mouth, and before we started talking, he took the gum out and stuck it behind his ear. And we were like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I was saving it for after the interview." I'm pretty sure that was Jamal Williams. I think.
Wow. What a guy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this offseason. Rob, there's obviously I don't
longest offseason of my life.
I don't think I saw your name around too much. Yeah, nothing too much happened. But obviously Aaron Rodgers situation.
Yeah.
You were kind of a big reporter for that, a big information gatherer, as it seemed. So when, obviously we're not trying to seek any unheard info out of you, but when did you really start hearing that Aaron wasn't too happy with the Packers?
Well, I think, and I don't think it took anybody that had any inside access, but I think you just listen to his press conference after the NFC Championship game. I mean, we all, look, when press conference ends, the reporters talk amongst themselves. Obviously you're competitive, you're not, sharing information. But when something like that happens, I remember a couple of us saying, "Wow, did he just say goodbye?" Was that his? And so I think that was a red flag. And look, even Aaron said the minute they drafted Jordan Love, things changed. But when he said that after the season, about, I don't remember what his exact phrasing was after the NFC Championship game, but he just sounded like a guy who was saying goodbye. And then, there's a couple mile markers where, they could have done things and they didn't. Like they could have, look, he won the MVP, and they could have said, you know what, we're recommitting to you. I know he has a contract, whatever, but these guys want to be assured things. And, they certainly could have done something there. He had the roster bonus in March that they ended up not touching or not converting, which would then push money out to future years, which would then make it harder for them to move on. And they didn't do any of that. And I did have a conversation with Rodgers in early April. And it was about Jeopardy. I did a story on right before the Jeopardy thing. It was one of the most enjoyable interviews that I've had with them. It was just a really fun conversation. I think he even went on Pat McAfee a couple of days later and said, McAfee loves to call me Bob and tweak me. And he said, yeah, Bob, it was one of my favorite conversations with Bob, Rodgers said. And at the end of that conversation, we talked just a little bit about football, not, it was more just kind of shooting the breeze. And it was nothing that he said, but I hung up the phone with him going, boy, I think he's resigned to playing one more year and that's it. Okay. So at that time, early April, I thought, okay, he knows this 2021 season is going to be his last year. Sometime in the next, 2-3 weeks, it blew up to the point where, well, maybe he's not even going to play this year. Obviously Adam's report on the day, Adam Schefter's report on the day of the draft. I had actually called Adam that day or that day before to ask him if he had heard. I think at that point was when the rumors about San Francisco, inquiring. I called Adam and I said, Adam, have you heard this? And Adam just said, Rob, sit tight. I'm working on something bigger that I think we're going to go with. And he sent me basically a rough draft of the story. And I was like, oh, this is something, and he said, asked me to tweak it or, edit it and add some things if there was things that, he didn't have. And about 3 hours, it was about 3 hours after I sent him the story back that it finally went to publish. And at that point, obviously all hell broke loose. But, I think there were definitely signs leading up to that day that, things could go one way or the other.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us a clear interpretation of Aaron Rodgers' new agreement with the Packers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you boil it down to one thing, that there's so much, mumbo jumbo in the contract, but by lopping off the 2023 season, by structuring it the way they did, it makes it easy for them to move on after this season. And it essentially gives Rodgers the freedom to move on. So it basically gives both parties an easy out after this season.
Okay. And is there any possibility he plays next year for the Packers?
Sure. Yeah, there is. I mean, he could say, man, I really had a great year. I really enjoyed it. Whatever I was feeling last year, I don't feel anymore. Sure. It's very possible. Now everyone says, well, if he wins the Super Bowl, he has to come back. Sure. But you could also argue if he wins the Super Bowl, it's a great time to walk away and say, hey, yeah, I gave you another Super Bowl. Now I'm going to go try it somewhere else. And look, I'm sure there's probably a lot of part of him that would love to, do what Brady did and, try to sort of dictate. Look, we know now that he wants more control, right? He knows that he wants control over decisions that are made about players. If you look at Tom Brady in Tampa, it looks like he has that, right? I mean, he went to Tampa, he basically signed or drafted everybody he wanted. Rodgers probably wants to, maybe he wants to do that in whether it's, Denver or, wherever it may be.
Yeah.
So, Big B, I think there's a possibility that it goes either way. The one thing I've learned about Rodgers is that he tends to, I don't want to say make threats about things, but he tends to say things that maybe he doesn't necessarily always follow through on. He certainly took it further than I ever thought would take it, or has taken it in the past this year, but he ultimately didn't take it all the way, right? So I guess the question is, would he really take it all the way and say, I want out of here? And that I don't know. He took it, he got closer to that than I ever thought he would get, and he got closer to that than anything he's ever threatened to do before. And so I don't know.
Now, do you think, and I think Rodgers' press conference was really revealing in this, like you just mentioned that he wants more control, that he wants more say. Do you think the Packer way, virtually how the Packers have run since Ron Wolf came in here and changed things around, is kind of difficult to pair with a superstar quarterback into today's NFL environment?
Yeah. I mean, you sort of wonder, okay, the first thing they did was trade for Randall Cobb, and at that point you wondered, okay, is this the beginning of a bunch of moves that Rodgers wants, or is this the one move that they're going to give Rodgers? And I would say that it's probably the one move that they gave him. I thought what was interesting, and I'm not blowing my own horn because I asked the question, but in that long press conference, Joey, where he basically confirmed everything that Schefter had reported, he went through his listing of grievances one by one. Somewhere in there, I said, I asked Rodgers, I said, so do you think you've gotten any of the things that you've asked for? And he just said, Rob, I don't know. And I think that's probably true. Like he doesn't know, at that time, he didn't know how much he was going to get that he wanted. And I think at this point, here we are, 6 weeks later or 8 weeks later, he probably still doesn't know exactly. But I think he does love football, does love his teammates and his coaches enough to put it aside and play one more year. The question is what happens next year when he's got to make basically the same decision again.
Yeah, well, it's not over. The Rodgers drama is not. We got a whole offseason ahead of us next year as well.
Yeah, we just it's going to be an issue at various times during the season. I don't think it's going to be an issue right now, or at least at the start of the season, but it's going to come up time and again.
Yep.
And every little comment he makes is going to be analyzed and overanalyzed, and that's part of it, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure that I will definitely have to have pre-game on mute, commentators on mute during the whole. I'll stick to the Chiefs Head TV watch party, so I don't have to have a recount of the drama every time. Let's see here. Another player that was kind of in the news. I don't remember if you were leading scoop guy on Davante Adams a few weeks ago. I know Ian Rappaport said that they were in a rough place, Davante Adams and the Packers on a contract extension. Do you know anything more about that?
No, I think Ian was the first one to have that. I think he's probably right. He's definitely right. I mean, otherwise they'd have a deal done by now, right? Yeah. I mean, and I think that I give Gutekunst, Stan Adams credit for being open and honest about what they want, and Davante wants to be the highest paid receiver. Brian Gutekunst said, well, we think he deserves to be the highest paid receiver, but we don't agree on what the highest paid receiver is, right? And it's the whole it's DeAndre Hopkins deal, and he did a 2-year extension, and Davante Adams looks at that and says the 2-year extension pays $27.5 million, which is true, but you can't forget about the remaining 3 years that he had on that deal. So when you average it out, it's really more like 22 or whatever, 22, 20. It's not $27.5 million. But Adams and his people look at it like, well, it's $27.5 million and we want that or more. So, this is not unusual, like, for news to come out that talks have broken down. Heck, I think we heard the same stuff about Aaron Jones at this time last summer. And I don't remember exactly about Bakhtiari, but I'm guessing there was times where, those talks had broken off, and, eventually they got both deals done. Not saying that, it's guaranteed that that's going to happen, but I think what people have to remember is by that news getting out, like someone wanted that news out, right? It certainly probably wasn't the Packers. So you have to say it was probably coming from Davante Adams, and they wanted it out because they wanted to force the Packers' hand. It's a negotiating tactic. Doesn't mean that it's not true, but it also is a negotiating tactic.
Yeah, I do definitely think the story got a little bit overblown, and when everybody was freaking out about it that first morning, and even the press conference, I think Devontae had that day or the following day, where he said, exactly the words of, "No, I'm not going to settle for anything less than being the highest paid wide receiver." Which, I mean, why would he say anything else in a press conference?
Yeah, he's not going to say, "Well, yeah, maybe I'll accept less."
Right.
His agent would kill him. So yeah. But it was. I thought, the one good thing that came out of it is I thought there was some open and honest dialogue.
Sure. Let's wrap it up here. Packers versus Saints this upcoming Sunday, opening the season in Jacksonville. Yeah, the interesting situation here. So last year the Packers beat the Saints in actually the Saints Stadium, 37-30, week 3. The Saints will be out without Michael Thomas, Drew Brees retiring. They also had, I believe, their kicker Will Lutz has an injury, and then somebody on the defense line, I can't recall who that is also suspended. So they are a little bit have a little bit of an injury, some turnover from last year. But last year, you shouldn't be too excited about Drew Brees not being there anymore. I mean, last year he wasn't the star quarterback that he was, just a shadow of it. But that defense will still be a force to be reckoned with. Let's go around here. Big B, I'll start with you. Where do you think the Packers have the biggest advantage over the Saints?
I'm going to say the wide receivers over the corners. Last year, Allen Lazard had a phenomenal game versus the Saints. And MVS didn't really have a big game, but when you add Randall Cobb into that, it should be really fun. And Marshawn Lattimore will most likely cover up Devontae the entire game, and don't really want to throw out Marshawn Lattimore. Yeah. So the backups have to step it up.
Yeah, some big opportunities for MVS, Cobb, Lazard, like you mentioned. This is a good question that I myself wrote in the script. I think about this here. See, Alvin Kamara is definitely going to be a trouble, but I also think Aaron Jones might be able to set himself up for a good game. We'll have to see how that offensive line performs. 2 rookies most likely starting on it with Royce Newman, Josh Myers. But hopefully they can set up a good game for Aaron Jones. Not Jamal Williams, unfortunately, but Aaron Jones and Kylan Hill. Rob, let's hear your opinion. Where do you think the Packers have the biggest advantage over the Saints?
I think it's the location of the game. I really do. I mean, they caught a huge break last year, not having to play with fans, right? I mean, the Superdome, I can't remember what it used to be. I don't know who sponsors it, but we'll just call it the Superdome, whatever it is now. That is one of the loudest, if not the loudest places I've ever been in the NFL. So last year to go in there with no fans, huge advantage. This year, like you said, Joey, to go in there with 2 rookie offensive linemen making their first start and not have to worry about crowd noise. In fact, I mean, in Jacksonville, there might be just as many Packers fans as there are Saints fans. I think that's a huge advantage. I actually wrote a piece about Josh Myers that's running this week. And in there's a little nugget about the last time the Packers have opened the season with 2 rookie starting offensive linemen. I'll just say this. I think you guys were probably born when it happened, but probably not even old enough to walk. So it's been a long time. You have to read the piece to find out.
Oh, boy. Thanks, Rob, so much for your time. We'll let you get to your actual job now.
I appreciate it, guys. Good luck and keep doing what you're doing.
We appreciate it. Hopefully, we're in the media room with you in a few years here.
I hope by the time that happens, I'm retired. You might be doing my job. You might have my job.